Wanderers Johannesburg and the long-awaited clash between Australia and South Africa, two of the top sides in world cricket, to settle the unofficial championship of the world. The two sides have met twice since South Africa got back into world cricket 5.5 years ago. Both series finished all square, a victory for each and one drawn game. And the same match at Wanderers 3 years ago, that featured the infamous clash with authority, both with the match referee and then the Australian board of Shane Warne and Merv Hughes. As usual, the pitch is the key thing. Normally Wanderers pitches, fast, bouncy, hard. The previous match here against India a couple of months ago, that was slow and low. And new groundsman Andy Atkinson is a little bit bothered about the amount of moisture in the pitch and how that'll affect what is bound to be a crucial first morning session. Well, there was moisture there, and it was a good toss to lose because neither captain was prepared to bowl first and thus commit his side to the probability of batting last on a wearing pitch. Team news was that South Africa left out Adam Bacher and Australia packed their side with batting. Michael Bevan at 7 and also picked as one of 4 bowlers together with Shane Warne and the new ball pair of Glenn McGrath and Jason Gillespie. McGrath's opening spell was brilliant. He dismissed Andrew Hudson, Jacques Kallis and Gary Kirsten in his first 43 balls for 9 runs. Immaculate line and length was allied to a hostile pace, and 2 of what would be 5 catches for wicketkeeper Ian Healy got rid of Hudson for a duck and Kirsten for 9. The Australians have done their homework on Kirsten with a new ball pair immediately bowling around the wicket to cramp his free offside play, and it worked. Well, at 25 for 3 in the 15th over, the pre-lunch session could have been anything. But Hansie Cronje and Daryl Cullinan, they put on 53 in 20 overs, either side of lunch, before Healy snapped up 2 more catches off McGrath and Gillespie to see off Cullinan for 27 and the restored Jonty Rhodes for 22.
Rhodes outside edge, wasn't, yes, he's caught behind. Healy takes another catch.
Both were out to loose strokes and Cronje was desperate for the sort of support he finally got from Shaun Pollock, whose 8 fours out of 35 off only 42 balls. That came from the best batting of the day. 50 came for the 6th wicket, only then for Pollock to overreach against Bevan, and Steve Waugh made his first mark on a match he was to dominate with a catch at point. Lance Klusener also went to Bevan.
You don't have to be a mathematical genius he's giving him out.
Before Warne outplotted Cronje after a fighting 76 from 144 balls, 46 of them in boundaries. Warne crowded every home batsman with 2 pad men except Cronje, and for him he dropped the offside man back on the missed drive and Mark Waugh clung on to a fine catch. Well, that was 195 for 8 and the home side all but down and out on what was now a good flat batting surface. But yet again David Richardson came to the rescue with a wonderfully fashioned unbeaten 72 from 87 balls, and he steered the last 2 wickets to another 102 runs and seemingly keeping his side out of trouble. Alan Donald played his part with 21 out of 58 for the 9th wicket before he wafted at Gillespie with a second new ball, and that brought in Paul Adams for a reprise of his memorable last wicket stand at Newlands against England. He missed more balls than he hit, but the effect was the same. The quicker bowlers lost their cool, the crowd roared as the runs came. McGrath's early patient smiles at the fun and games soon turned into a volley of abuse, which Adams was captured on camera as returning in the most delightful manner. He simply stuck his tongue out. The broadest grin of the lot belonged to Healy when Adams attempted the most ferocious reverse sweep against Warne. The ball before the leg spinner ended the fun with a plumb LBW.
Will Warne have the last laugh? I think he might have. Got him.
Australia let South Africa off the hook. The lack of a third seamer was quite important, and also they dropped 4 catches with Warne suffering twice. The second day, that was shortened by 30 overs because of bad light and rain, and a closing score of 191 for 4 was the closest the home side was to get in the remainder of what became a one-sided match. Taylor's poor run, that continued, only 270 runs in his previous 15 innings, but he was unlucky to play on to one from Pollock that kept low, the only ball really to misbehave in that fashion in the game. The 2 Matthews, Hayden and Elliott, they batted in contrasting styles in a stand of 95 in 27 overs. Elliott's offside grace, that was in the David Gower class, and he also pulled and hooked with great certainty until he was bounced out by Donald for 85. Hayden, he'd earlier gone to a Cullinan slip catch off Pollock for 40. The batting looked so easy, it was a shock when Donald got Mark Waugh and then Elliott out in 3 balls, both too ugly attempts to pull.
The keeper, he's gone. The tough trot continues for Mark Taylor. That's in the air and he's got to be out here. Paul Adams is under it and that's a waste. It really is a shame. It was a very good innings by Matthew Elliott.
Steve Waugh and Greg Blewett, they marked the 3rd day by becoming only the 12th pair of batsmen to bat throughout a complete Test day. Previous instance, coincidentally, was by captain and coach Mark Taylor and Geoff Marsh, who scored 301. That was against England at Trent Bridge in 1989. Waugh guided his partner through the day in magnificent fashion, pacing things so well. The 3 sessions were worth 93, 94 and 101. Unblinking concentration, even against the support bowling of Kallis and Cronje, ensured that Australia put the home total into perspective by grinding out a huge lead.
And crack that, cop that, go and get that. And that is Steve Waugh at his very best. Brings up the 300.
Blewett's 3rd Test 100 to go with a 99 against the West Indies in Adelaide and 4 50s in only 23 innings. It came off 223 balls, and Steve Waugh's 12th 100 for his country came off exactly the same number of deliveries, although his 13 fours were 4 fewer than Blewett. Had the home bowlers not stuck to it, Australia would have galloped away, but a score of 479 for 4 at the close of the 3rd day meant that the visitors had to bat on for at least half of day 4. Waugh, troubled at one time by a shin problem, he was first to go, caught off a tired stroke off Kallis for 160, but his innings ranks with any he's ever played for sheer value to the cause. Blewett, he cracked on to 214, and that included 34 fours.
Losing bowls, driven beautifully by Blewett for 4, packed offside field, he beat the lot of them.
Before he was nicely caught at 3rd man on the heave by Adams, and after Bevan wandered in at 559 for 5, not exactly a crisis, he scored an unbeaten 37 before Taylor closed at a mammoth 628 for 8. That was a lead of 326, and it gave his bowlers a minimum of 138 overs in which to win the match. Well, they needed exactly half of them, because the home side collapsed again, this time against the spin of Warne and Bevan, who shared 8 wickets. Kallis, well, he battled away for 48 overs for 39, but with Warne dealing a duck to Cullinan after Hudson was brilliantly thrown out by Steve Waugh, and then the same man strangled out Cronje to a Healy leg side catch. It was only when, not if, Waltzing Matilda would be heard all over North Johannesburg.
And a top edge.
Oh, that's in trouble, he's gone. I think Jonty Rhodes feels as though he might have got a little bit of bat on that. But
Warne's 4 wickets included Kirsten, Cullinan, Rhodes and Kallis, and he paved the way for Bevan to wrap things up in devastating fashion. Hayden caught Clouston and Richardson off him in 1 over, and then he bowled Donald and Adams in 3 balls of the next. That gave him a spell of 4 for 2 in 12 overs. It also meant a slump of 31 for 6 in 21 overs of the final day, and Australia extended their run to 15 tests since their last draw, and they did it in emphatic fashion. It was their 10th win, and most of the 5 defeats have come in dead series. They had the luck to bowl first on day 1, with a huge gap between the 2 sides. That was down to technique and resilience under pressure, and little to do with fortune. They made their own. Well, after the thrashing at Wanderers, innings and 196 runs, Australia were unchanged. South Africa inevitably had to make changes. They made 3. Out went 3 players from Natal, Clouston, Hudson and Rhodes. In came Bacher, Gibbs and McMillan. An inexperienced top 6, but the main talking point before the match was the pitch. I asked, among other people, the former captain and president of Eastern Province, Geoffrey Dakin, when last he'd seen such a rich covering of grass on a St George's pitch. He thought for a moment and said, never. The Australians were suspicious, and more so when they discovered that there'd be no Hessian covering overnight. Hessian covering now, that takes away overnight sweating and moisture, and well, they smelt a bit of a plot. They objected to the match referee, Mr Raman Subbarao. He checked with conditions, and it was found that it wasn't compulsory, and therefore the Australians, they'd got to like it and do nothing else about it. Well, the pitch, the toss, this was going to be even more crucial than ever. Who would win it, and what would they do? It was a toss that, in the nail-biting end, settled a magnificent test match that only lasted for 3.5 days. Never at St George's and rarely anywhere else has the ball seemed and bounced so much as on the first morning, and the inexperienced South African top order never had a chance. Hardly a ball from Gillespie and McGrath failed to deviate, and the miracle was that, having lost the crucial toss and being put into bat, South Africa only lost 4 wickets. Kirsten was bounced out yet again from round the wicket by Gillespie for the first of 3 ducks in the first session. The others were Callis. He was caught off a lifting leg side delivery by Blewett, and Cronje, who played on to McGrath. The first 2 wickets went to Gillespie and the next 2 to McGrath, who firstly had Backer playing loosely to Elliott in the gully and then got through the Cronje defence.
That's out. Played it on.
That was 22 for 4 in the first 13 overs, but somehow Cullinan and Newbold Gibbs stayed until just after lunch and took the score to 70. It was then that the rapidly improving Gillespie took 3 wickets in 5 overs to dismiss Cullinan, Gibbs and Pollock, the last 2 with successive balls to put himself on a hat-trick. Cullinan on 34, like Backer before him, played away from his body, and Warne took the catch in the slip cordon. Gibbs was bowled for 31 and Pollock LBW.
Now, Herschel Gibbs was the man who was dropped by Mark Waugh, but that's made a mess of his stumps. Let's hit him on the pad. Was there any bat in that? Yes, no, he's given it out.
So at 95 for 7 in the 36th over, South Africa were again on the floor, but old soldiers McMillan and Richardson prevented the knockout with yet another face-saving partnership. Both phlegmatic and with rock-solid techniques, they wore down the 2-man pace attack and then coped with the wiles of Warne in a stand between them of 85 in 29 overs. Shane Warne, he was marvellous. In order to keep control at one end and use McGrath and Gillespie downwind at the other, Taylor asked Warne to bowl under totally unsuitable grassy conditions with a shiny ball that was difficult to grip, never mind rip. His response was outstanding, and the 3 wickets he picked up at the end were well deserved after such a masterly performance. Richardson hit him for 1-6, then holed out to McGrath at long off, going for another. He scored 48, and McMillan then completed his 10th Test 50 before he found Steve Waugh at deep square off a pull.
He's caught behind square.
Donald was last man out, caught and bowled to give a home total of 209. Seemingly at least 50 below par on a pitch. Well, that got marginally easier for batting later in the day. It was back to normal, or rather abnormal, next morning, and the controversial absence of any Hessian undercovering meant the ball again went everywhere until mid-afternoon. Australia got away lightly before lunch. They only lost Taylor to Richardson off Pollock, and Mark Waugh to a marginal LBW decision for 20.
He's gone, LBW. Hansie Cronje moving one back this time.
Pollock could only bowl 2 overs before he limped out of the match and the series with a hamstring injury. So now it was all down to Donald and McMillan. Australia seemed to have talked themselves into the wrong frame of mind about the pitch, and they lost their last 9 wickets for 98 and their last 8 for 58, starting with Mark Waugh. Elliott was run out for 23 by Cronje, with partner Steve Waugh ball watching the misfield.
The keeper's in and he's out. And given out, no need for the third umpire.
And then McMillan whipped out Waugh and Bevan in 3 overs.
And out. What a catch by Richardson. And there's an appeal. Brian McMillan says you're out, and umpire Venkat agrees. There was a very woody sound.
Healy wafted away to no purpose for 33 balls and finally mishooked Cronje, and Blewett was bowled by Donald. That was to be his only wicket in a match in which he bowled magnificently.
Bowled him. Blewett is out, and the resistance could be gone.
South Africa bowled with purpose and control, but for Australia to concede a lead of 101 to a total of 209 was awful. Worse followed for them, with Kirsten hitting his first ball for 4 and leading Backer into an unbroken partnership that evening of 83 in 30 overs.
Brings him forward, and that's a lovely shot. It's not his normal shot, Adam Backer. He normally hits a lot squarer than that. A lovely front foot stride, a full face of the bat meeting the ball.
Starting the 3rd day with an overall lead of 184 without loss, with the pitch still too bouncy for comfort, well, that meant that South Africa only had to go most of the way towards doubling that lead and they'd have been out of sight. Instead, their batting was, if possible, even less disciplined than on the first day. Kirsten was done for length by Gillespie, whose 3 wickets before lunch, well, they set the alarm bells ringing. After Callis was brilliantly thrown out by Blewett, Back a top edge to long leg for 49. And Cullinan and Gibbs went for 9 between them.
In the air, going down to fine leg, he's going to be caught, and there we go. It's a real turnaround in this test match now.
Confident shot, he's out. Cullinan is out, leg before wicket. Gillespie strikes again.
There it is. Beautifully bowled, Glenn McGrath.
A lunch score of 137 for 6 after McMillan was LBW to Bevan off the last ball before lunch still gave Cronje, Pollock and Richardson the chance to increase the lead of what was then 238 to over 300. But Warne and Bevan were brilliant. They were helped by poor shot selection, but what a treat to see two such quality spinners in action together. Cronje is one of the best players of spin in world cricket, but his failure to read several googlies from Bevan ended his innings of 27 when he edged to give Healy his 299th test victim. Pollock was LBW to Warne, hiding the bat on the forward push, and that was fair enough. What was not was the wasteful wickets of Donald and Adams to leave a furious Richardson stranded on 3 not out. Donald swung to cover and Adams got out to a reverse sweep off Warne with the latter's laughing reaction. Well, that drew criticism from coach Bob Warmer. Richardson gave the youngster an earful as they walked off because a target of 270 might have been 61 more than any of the previous 3 innings, but it did give Australia a sniff if they batted well. Mark Waugh did more than that. He played an innings of 116 that he described after the match as the best he'd ever played for Australia or in first-class cricket. He came in at 30 for 2 after a run-out that would take pride of place in any museum of collector's items. Left-handers Elliott and Hayden got in such a tangle that they both lunged for the same crease, each unaware of the other. In horse racing, the judge would have asked for a second print, but Hayden's bat, that was a millimetre short of that of his partner, he had to go. Waugh got to 50 off only 87 balls on the 3rd evening, and even though Elliott was caught and bowled by Adams for 44, Australia was strongly placed at the close with 145 for 3, needing another 125. Steve Waugh and Blewett went before lunch, but with Junior Waugh on 86 and the score 204 for 5, Australia still had the edge.
And Waugh, beautiful use of the feet, down the ground. He's a beautiful player in form, isn't he?
The second new ball brought no better luck to Donald, who had Waugh dropped by Cullinan when the score was 244 and he was 105. Last chance, well, not where this South African side were concerned. 258, Waugh went, 3 wickets went for 7 runs, and suddenly 5 were needed with Ian Healy joined by Gillespie.
Still have a cricket match on our hands. That's going to be close. He's given him LBW. Jacques Kallis strikes again.
Get him in singles, George Hurst and Wilfred Rhodes said. Not for Ian Healy. A 6 off Cronje and it was all over. A great, great finish.
Signals to the crowd. That's what we want. 6 runs to win it. That's the test match. That's the series. The Australian team are happy. The Australian vice-captain finishes it off in style. You couldn't ask for a better finish.
And we got the 3 wickets and I thought it was a big opportunity for us. But it was a very seesaw game. And I thought in the end the difference was probably Mark's batting.
We started off really well. They had 8 for 95 and looked like knocking them over for 110, 120. They fought back and knocked us over, and then we fought back. It looked like we were going to win by 5 wickets, and then they fought back right then. It was a great test match, and anyone says test match cricket's dead is a fool.
Dead test match? There's no such thing. Players on both sides have got too much to play for, including pride and places. Take South Africa. They've had a hammering from media and supporters alike following 2 defeats. Can they avoid the 3rd? And as for Australia, well, not all their party are certain of selection for the coming Ashes tour of England. And that applies in particular to skipper Mark Taylor. He's been short of runs in his previous 18 innings, no 50s, not even averaging 20. Further problems for him. Heavy rains in Pretoria in the 3 weeks leading up to this test match at Centurion Park have resulted in the unique situation of the groundsman erecting a marquee over the square so that he could get to work and prepare it. So there just might be problems for Mark Taylor with the pitch, and therefore with the coin and the bat, this is a very big match for him. Let's see what happens. Well, it was a big match on both counts for Taylor. Firstly, he lost the toss, and then a personal match aggregate of 43 extended his run of test innings to 20 without a 50. The pitch, well, that looked green in a patchy fashion that suggested uneven bounce, and so it proved. Cronje wanted to bowl first, but surprisingly little happened in the first 2 sessions when the Australians scored 146 for 4. And those dismissals, well, they were all self-inflicted. Hayden and Mark Waugh missed straight balls.
That's bowled him. Somehow he's got it through.
Elliott was beautifully caught off a hook at long leg by Schultz, who also had to tiptoe around the rope after taking the swirling catch. And then Taylor gave Richardson the first of his 6 catches in the match and 4 in the innings when he undid 3 1/4 hours of graft for 38 runs with a wild slash at a wide one from Klusener. Steve Warren blew it, batted properly to take the score to 190 for 4 in the 71st over, and the Cronje gamble looked a loser until Schultz came back in an inspired spell of fast swing bowling with the old ball to rush out Australia's last 6 wickets for 37 in 19 overs. And it was that dramatic final session of the first day which also featured the start of a torrid match for English umpire Mervyn Kitchen. Within half an hour after tea, he had to give 4 marginal decisions, of which there were doubts about the leg side catch to Richardson and the LBW decision against Bevan on the question of height. The game, well, that deteriorated for Kitchen and finally also for colleague Cyril Mitchley, with a cruel television eye revealing a number of mistakes that were well into double figures. From Kitchen's end, Healy looked out LBW off the ball that cannoned into the covers to give him his first run, and he went on to score 19. Waugh scored 67 to strengthen his world rating spot of #1, and he was to score a second 50 in the match for only the 4th time in his career for Australia. Schultz and the magnificent Donald, well, they shared 7 of the 14 wickets they took in the match, although the Australians thought at the end of the day that their 227 total, that was still a competitive score. Adam Backer and Brian McMillan showed them differently on the second day, with McMillan's promotion to #3 the key to his side's best and most solid batting performance of the series. After Kirsten again failed against McGrath, and that gave Healy his 300th test victim, the second wicket pair of the beginner and the old soldier put on 102 in 39 overs before Mark Waugh's 4th ball brought a bat-pad catch from McMillan. His 55 included 8 fours, and Backer, well, he went on to bat all day for 94 with 10 fours and a 6.
High and handsome. That's all the way. Over the fence for 6.
On the 3rd morning, under overcast conditions, McGrath was superb. He bowled throughout the complete session to take 3 for 23 from 14 overs, and he earned the wickets of Callis, caught in the gully, a becalmed Backer, who was LBW after batting 85 minutes for 2 runs, and then Richardson, who played on second ball to one that bounced a lot.
Nasty one onto his stumps. Well, the Australians, what a fight back.
All this was after a fiery little battle between Gillespie and night watchman Simcox that included 2 successive fours, a blown kiss and a few choice words, but Gillespie had the final say, and a slump from 240 for 3 to 262 for 7 meant Australia were back in the game. It was then that Klusener and Cronje counter-attacked with a stand of 68 in 16 overs, and Australia's lack of a 3rd seamer cost them dearly. The pitch was too slow for Warne, who still bowled well, and for Bevan, who didn't.
He's a good striker of the ball. He's got a lot of talent for a lower middle order batsman, basically in the side for his bowling.
Klusener went for 30, and then Cronje crashed his way to an unbeaten 79, and also became the first South African batsman to pass 2,000 runs since readmission 5.5 years ago. A lead of 157 meant Australia needed a good start, but 2 quick wickets for Donald and 1 for Schultz had them reeling at 28 for 3. Poor Hayden. Already knowing he was one of 3 Australians being replaced for the one-day series, he got one of the slowest trigger fingers in history from Mitchley for an LBW decision that was difficult to understand, mainly because of the huge forward stride Hayden made before the ball hit his pad. He played no stroke, but there was no certainty that the ball would have hit the stumps after travelling another 8.5 feet. The Waugh twins came together and nearly got through the day until an awful stroke by Mark against Simcox just before bad light brought an early finish, removed Australia's slim chance of setting the home side around 150 to win. Simcox, well, he's an abrasive, hard-headed bowler, and he knows how to unsettle batsmen. Next morning I congratulated Simcox on the wicket and also said it was a bad shot. The reply? Yeah, well, he played the man, not the ball. Earlier in his stand of 66 with Steve, Donald bowled one of the most fearsome overs imaginable to the world's #1, hitting him 3 times and beating him twice. It has to rival the famous Michael holding over to Geoffrey Boycott in Barbados in 1981, and Waugh later said that spectators would rarely see anything better in Test cricket.
A little scrappy, he's in there fighting, and his biggest concern is the fact that it's doing a bit of damage to his body.
On the fourth and final morning, Donald was unstoppable. His fifth ball of the morning, and Blewett's first, was a thunderbolt of a Yorker, and he came back after lunch to get Warne LBW and also York Gillespie in 3 balls.
Again, the Yorker has worked for Alan Donald. He's taken 5 wickets in the innings, and the Australian innings is in tatters.
Australia's last chance went when the score was 108 for 5, and Simcox it was who outthought Bevan by staying over the wicket to the left-hander and then bowling him around his legs on the sweep. Steve Waugh was left to make what he could of the rest of the innings, and it seemed inevitable that he would remain undefeated. Flashpoint of the morning was the dismissal of Healy, a Mitchley decision that provoked a violent display of dissent from the Australian vice-captain. His behaviour at the crease and in the walk-off would probably have brought action anyway from match referee Raman Subbarao, but what happened towards the top of the stairs leading to the dressing room clinched it. Hands and bat somehow became detached by several yards, and the subsequent 2-match suspension was inevitable. Donald's 5 for 36 was his 8th such haul for South Africa, and took his total of Test wickets to 155 in 33 games, with only Huey Tayfield of that country having taken more, 170. Donald took 41 wickets in his 8 Test matches of the summer, and when he showed at Centurion Park that when pace, hostility and rhythm merge, he's not just among the world's best fast bowlers, he is the best. Needing 29 to win is often a no-win situation for the openers, and both Kirsten and Bacher went for 15 to underline what a chance Australia missed by not batting well enough in either innings to set South Africa a target of 150. The win by 8 wickets, well, that restored some local pride. As for Australia, they deservedly won the series. They were the better side, but not by as much as that first Test win at Wanderers by an innings and 196 runs suggested.